Welcome back, everybody, to your daily update on the state of the Malazan Empire. And it's not daily because I couldn't make my video yesterday. I started recording and then it started storming so much that the camera fell over. And I had to go to a video conference that lasted until midnight. And then I was just too tired to do anything. All right. And so now I'm back. And you'll get another one about the beginnings of the Crippled God later today. So this is basically time travel. Just imagine me being yesterday's Raph. I even put on yesterday's shirt to make this authentic and everything. And we're gonna wrap up Dust of Dreams now. Let's do this. Cheers. If you're wondering, I hope this is not going to be too loud, but my neighbors have decided to use this day to either tear down some walls or cut down some trees. I mean, they're technically doing both, so I hope they gotta, keep calm for a couple of minutes so I can talk. Anyway, Dust of Dreams, the last two chapters are very much about slaughter, and a lot of it senseless. This, I feel, is the most important bit there. There's not that much like deep thinking going on in those two chapters. We see Stormy and Gessler taking on their role as Shield Anvil and what's her name? A Mortal Sword of the K'Chain Jamal. We see, but first we go to that big battle, which is just like one epic fight scene, like more or less. That's the battle between the Bone Hunters, the Kundral Burnt Tears, the Lethari forces, and the K'Chain Naruk, the Short Tails, the other part of the K'Chain that we obviously already knew they were out there. A smaller group of them was like killed by those undead Jaghod. So there's that. And now they are looking for the last army of the K'Chain Jamal, which we'll meet later on. And dumb luck, or just like bad luck, means that a human army or two human armies are in their way. And what happens if you have thousands of huge weapon like lizards with actually like ray guns or whatever those are, and they come across a bunch of puny humans? Well, they chew through them in a rather brutal way. So there's that. And then we get, obviously, a huge battle. We see some interesting things. Our, High Mage Quick Ben finally, really lets loose and destroys just like an entire Fury, are they called? Like one of those phalanxes of, I don't know how many hundreds or thousands of those change him. Well, he just destroys one of those in one go, which, holy shit. He was more subtle earlier on, but there's no chance to do that anymore. We also see Ruthen Gud do whatever he can do with Stormrider armor. I feel Ruthen Gud's arc is something where I really would love to know more about the character. I don't know if he's mentioned more in Carcanas. I kind of hope so, because when in one of his dreams or like inner monologues, he's talking about Draconis, and if he has known or met Draconis, he probably met him in Carcanas. So I'm looking forward to figure out more about him. But now he's going into, well, also killing a lot of K'Chain Naruk. So yeah, there's that battle. It's brutal. It kills a lot of people. It gives rise to a lot of really stupid and dumb heroism of most, the army, mostly the Bone Hunter army, both the heavies and before that the Marines in the first row, all of that. And that's epic on its face, but I feel like the more interesting thing here that we'll learn from this chapter and the second one is that a lot of slaughter and violence and war is basically senseless and meaningless. It's something that we should reflect on when we look at like what's happening these days in the world, like or like in our day, like our world, a lot of wartime slaughter is just basically meaningless. People being in the wrong place in the wrong time, and that's it. That's just what happens, and it's important. I feel because when we look at I don't know. When we look at a lot of like epic fantasy these days, whether it's grimdark or heroic or whatever kind of genre tag you want to like put on it, that's not the point. But a lot of times, fantasy is a violent genre, right? Conflicts usually get solved either by huge displays of magic or by like armed forces. When you compare that to like other kinds of genres of novels that we read, fantasy, sci-fi also to a large degree, not obviously not all of it, but a lot of it, usually conflicts are resolved by violence, and it is often painted either like it. So there's two things. Like in a lot of like more epic fantasy, violence is depicted in a positive way. It's like even though we have like really explicit depictions of violence, it is still, you know, it is meaningful. There's a certain amount of glory or whatever to be found in it, and but the more important thing there is, because so often violence is just the seemingly the only means of conflict resolution in a lot of fantasy and science fiction literature. And what it does is it gives meaning to war, even if you have like descriptions of war where, you know, people die in gruesome ways, and it's clear that like actually fighting and dying there um, is brutal, and you don't want to do that. But it still has meaning because it leads towards a resolution of the story of the conflicts. Something good happens in the end. There's the idea of sacrifice and what have you. And what Erikson does here with that battle in particular, it is absolutely fucking meaningless and senseless. It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't help the plot. I mean, like you could probably argue on like a more like dramatic level of what it does, but within like the in-world logic or whatever, there is no meaning to this battle. It's just people being in the wrong place at the wrong time. And the way he sets that up in that with that like reflection, that dream, no, like mostly reflection of Queen Abrastal about her uncle being killed in that ridiculous like chain of circumstances, chain of events with the beehives and stuff like that. Yes, the idea of meaning or meaning in our lives or having that kind of like meaning towards to everything that we do in life is an illusion. A lot of times when tragedy strikes, it strikes without meaning. It strikes just out of the blue. It just fucks you up because that's how the universe works. It may sometimes even have something of a cruel sense of humor in there, but also that one is us interpreting the events, right? There is no big overarching narrative to our lives. We are just like, we are forging that ourselves. We're constructing that ourselves, which is obviously from the point from where we can take strength, because once we realize that we can do a lot of things to actually change the narrative and so forth to our own lives. But it is, I feel, important to sometimes subvert that idea of violence always being the means of conflict resolution or something, and show us that even large-scale combat, large-scale army-wide combat and slaughter can be completely meaningless. Like, no one wins in that. And that, I feel, it makes the entire, like, Naruk fight there, with all the terrible costs that it has, it makes that an important, or like not unique but very rare aspect in a lot of like fantasy, military fantasy, epic fantasy today, because most of the war is like has at least a token like justification or anything, and here there is not even that. It's just like you're running the way of someone, and then, well, you're fucked basically. And I feel that's sort of the one thing that I can take away from that huge battle against the Naruk, apart from obviously it having really great fight scenes and descriptions and so forth. So there's that, and I feel that's good, in a way. All right. Let's look at the other part there. I feel this is going to be like a rather short video. We'll see. Um, that being the next senseless slaughter. The T'lan Imass killing the rest killing the rest of the Barghast because revenge, and realizing how futile revenge is in the same process, but still going ahead and going through with it, and just like doing it anyway. And that ends that ends the Sinan Barghast. And I don't know, that part is so sad, because it's like sometimes it's just too late to learn, and sometimes you go ahead with things. And I feel that's sort of the point there. The other point that you can take away is like, sometimes we do things even though we already know that they're senseless and will probably harm us more than they will help us. And I feel that's sort of something that we can take away from the just like massacre of the Sinan Barghast by the T'lan Imass. It's just rage, and futile rage, and going ahead with it, while knowing that you, as the one person who's doing that, is taking like a personal cost of it as well. That's sort of the other thing that we need to be aware of, right? It's like we all take a cost, although obviously killing is the ultimate cost there, but it's still like, if you can read that bit and like take away from it, I feel like that maybe we like doing things because of some inner sense of, I don't know, not even duty or whatever, like to err on the side of compassion and not go through with something no matter how hurt we are inside already, is, I guess, sort of something that it's almost one of these like it's almost a Christian thing that you can take away from it. Not that Christianity, when you have the whole idea of love thine enemy and turn the other cheek and stuff like that, is talking about the cost of exercising revenge. It's not talking about the psychological cost of exercising revenge, because that's not the kind of book Jesus wrote. Well, not Jesus wrote, but you know what I mean. But but still, that kind of goes into the same like direction, which, you know, when you look at some of the basic principles of Christianity, you know, as much as I'm not a Christian or not a believing person in general, not everything that's written down in those books is always like evil by default or wrong by default, right? There's some general, like, maybe it's good to look at these kind of things, wisdom in those books as well. So yeah, take away from the slaughter now. That's a way to go, to mix the massacre of the Barghast with Christian metaphors, Christian messages. Yeah, well, anyway, I guess the point there is that revenge, or at least massacre and revenge, is for the most part meaningless, senseless, and will hurt us, even when we like. And I guess that's the other bit there, the hollow feeling, right? There's no satisfaction for, not even for Onas Tulan when he's doing this. There's no satisfaction in the moment where he does it, but he goes through with it anyway. And I'm guilty of that. Well, not that I've massacred whole tribes of Barghast in my life, but I'm certainly someone who has in the past gone through with things just for the principle of the thing, while feeling hollow while doing it, being aware of it. But since I'm a stubborn asshole, I tend to go through with things, and maybe I'll learn from it. We'll see. Probably not, though, because I'm also stupid. Anyway, that was sort of the next massacre, because we have like 3 big battles. And not the Barghast massacre is that big. It's just, the next one of those. So let's go and look at the last one, and then at one final scene before we end this for today. Not for today, but for now, and then I'll be back later on with the beginning of Crippled God. The K'chain Chamal, disruption, and the idea of not giving up, the enemy of fatalism, right? So that's the thing. Stormy and Gessler at some point accept their roles. Stormy faster than Gessler for what reasons? Lie in their like personality, and but the point I'm looking at here is that what Gessler explains, or is it Stormer? I keep forgetting. The idea that humans never give up, right? The idea of struggling for life, something that, and this is sort of, I feel, the interesting thing that we need to talk about later on. The idea there is that since we are human, since we as humans are mostly individual, our own lives have a higher value to ourselves, right? We keep on fighting for survival as an individual all the time because there's only us. For the K'chain, whether it's Naruk or Chamal, that's not the case, because they have a almost like hive-like structure. A hive mind structure, not a hive mind, but like a hive structure in a way. The individual K'chain is not important there. And it's something similar that you see with the Talan Imas. Not so much the Imas, but maybe also the Imas in a bit. But definitely with the Talan Imas, it's like you're just one part of the overall like Talan Imas with that one people-wide goal of destruction of the Jackhood and so forth. But your individuality and your individual survival is not part of that thing, and giving up that individuality comes, so you can read it at least, comes with the thought, or like the problem that you may lose the will to struggle on up to the absolute extreme, right? When we compare that to what is going on with the snake, right? The Ribby snake. The extremes that we as human beings, as individuals, will go to for individual survival are absolutely extreme. They can be abhorrent almost, but that's our natural drive. Giving in to that whole collective hive-like structure, in a way, collective I guess is better here, kind of reduces that individual urge to struggle on, because that's no longer the unity, the entity that matters. The entity that matters is not the individual. It is the survival of the tribe, of the nest, the swarm, what have you. You look at those ants crossing rivers, like not rivers, but you know what I mean, the small brooks and stuff like that, by collecting into this ball and rolling over. And yes, the ones on the outside and the downside will drown, but that's not the point there. So that's, I guess, an argument that you could make towards individualism up to a point, being more valuable, or like having an edge over collectivism in a way. In other regards, obviously, that's not the case. We see that when it comes to the fact that the K'chain actually fight to their death and don't break and run. There's no how to say yeah, there's no survival instinct in the individual. That's sort of the word I was looking for, without knowing that I was looking for it, because yeah. But that's the point there, right? There is no individual survival instinct, so you will stand and defend until the final thing, because that's not a choice. But on the other hand, you might just not go to the extremes that we as humans, once we have no other choice, will go to. And this is, I guess, the other, like, the ongoing dialogue between individualism and collectivism within the Malazan Book of the Fallen. There. All right. So yeah, we have that battle, which has to be fought because maybe at some point the Kachane, that conflict between the Naruk and the Jamal is unavoidable. So that battle has to be fought. But even like after that, we have the discussion about what happens afterwards. We have the discussion of whether even the Naruk are redeemable in time and can actually come back to be part of Kachane society. And this is, I feel, what makes Dust of Dreams, even though it is a hugely depressing book, right? I feel it's, from my reading this time around, I would say Dust of Dreams is probably the most depressing book of them all. Because of its like dragging nature, and you see all these people coming, like moving towards all these terrible ends, and it's all unavoidable. It just like, you know, it's seeing a train wreck, but on a glacial level, basically. But there is hope at the end. There's a lot of hope at the end. There's even hope for the Naruk, even though, you know, there is that. There is obviously also that last scene I wanted to talk about, and that is the scene with Hood. Hood returning back to life, and his 14 former captains, and Hood himself on YouTube. Although I still wish he would have gone with Hood's Bony Prang here as well, but you know, pointed that scene out as well. Hood, once he comes back to life, and I've obviously not read the Carcanas part where all of that stuff is explained, when he wakes up and he finds those people whom he apparently betrayed to take over the Lordship of Death, what he does is he actually, you know, goes down on his knees and he humbles himself and he asks for forgiveness, or at least he humbles himself, and they forgive him, or at least let him live. And so there's that. That's pretty fucking cool. That was like an almost a positive scene for the end of the story. Now I'm not gonna spoil or anything, but you've seen like people that ended up in Dragnipur at this point, right? They kind of come back if they weren't killed in the sword already. But yeah, I'm just gonna say that now. Was there anything else that I wanted to talk about? Well, the whole thing with with Icarium and the ghost inside of Icarium's head just became even more weird when we had Featherwitch give Icarium the eye of the errant, so he can actually build that Azath there, the Finnest for the Azath there, to close the rent and leave the Naruk, the rest of the Naruk in their warren. Yeah, I don't get it. I also feel there's maybe... Well, I guess that's sort of the point there that we should like think about. I really hope this is not too noisy with that construction back in the background there. But anyway, point is, Ampila's uprooted, which is awesome. But it also happened because the other two Chigal assassins took out her front brain, so it's dumb animal. It's the dumb animal, and I feel that kind of comes back to that whole idea of individualism versus collectivism in a way, because once you take out that part of of the brain sort of that is in, like is actually thinking, and you reduce that Kachane matron to her animal brain, so to speak, that's when the individual like survival instinct once again kicks in. It is a suicidal one in this case because you can't live like that. That's sort of the other thing that you can take away from that. It's like pure animal survival instinct is not enough. We've spoken about that before when we talk about Badal and the child snake, I guess. But it is there. That kind of like individual thing comes back once you take away some of the higher brain functions, which was not where I wanted to go with this. um, yeah. Um, yeah. But oh yeah, right. The final thing there is the Kachane come back. The Kachane come back by joining humans to help Gessler and Stormy now and decide to work with them. And I feel the interesting thing there is change once again. We've spoken about that before. The Malazan Book of the Fallen is also to a large part about how change is important, how to be like conscious of change, how to deal with it once you are conscious of that change, and how to go from there is a large part of the Malazan Book of the Fallen. And Gunther Asil did something revolutionary by actually seeing that continuing the old ways will just lead to self-destruction. She's the one who, speaking in that metaphor from earlier in Dust of Dreams, she's the one who took that left, I don't want to call it the left-hand path, that sounds kind of weird, but who took that small, like that curved away and did not let her people run over the cliff. And it killed herself, it destroyed herself, but it means that the Kachane Shamal are once again coming into like the overall like world after living in isolation so long and taking part, and maybe through cooperation with humans like Gessler, Stormy, and Khalid, have a survival chance as a species. And there's a powerful image in here. It is literally that no species can stand it, go it alone in this universe, in this world, or in this case, obviously the Malazan world. But look at it always as something that has to say something about our own world and our own lives as well. We can't go it alone. We need to, work together as all these species to make it work. And the Kachane Shamal have finally understood it, so they're there to do this. And I feel with this almost hopeful message, and now that even the last chainsaw has slowed down and the sun is shining, I'll leave you until later when we talk about the crippled god, and won't that be fun? So until then, cheers.